And now I have with me Mr. Peter Hugg, the CEO of Football West. Good evening, Peter.
Hi, Eamon. How are you?
Good to have you on. And just a couple of quick questions on the NPL. First of all, the week that's been in Football West, it must have been a big week all round.
Yeah, look, we always knew that there was going to come a crescendo, I suppose, after over 12 months of discussions about the NPL and many forums, many workshops, many meetings, many emails, discussions, media interviews, etc., etc. There was going to come a time when the board would ultimately sign off and approve the number of clubs and the makeup of the NPL for the 2014 inaugural season.
And the criteria, the 12 clubs that have been accepted, well, 11 plus Perth's Glory, you're happy with the criteria and with the, shall we say, the performance of them clubs?
I'm happy with the process and looking back and conscious of everything that was the feedback and the outcomes of the results and what was put to the board. I'm happy, as is the assessment panel, as the board, the probity committee, the department, the FFA, everyone that was involved in it. We're happy with the process. It'd be fair to say that we didn't have any particular views in terms of the clubs and the makeup, and so the result and the clubs that do make up the 12-team competition next year, or the 12-club competition, is what it is. And it's not the case of being unhappy or happy or whatever. I share, and no doubt you'll come to the point in terms of the regional, I share their disappointment that there is no regional team. We would have loved to have had regional teams and a greater coverage. And to some it may seem that we've actually consolidated and gone backwards. I think it's a shame, but it is what it is, and the process is what it was. And as much as we would have loved to have had a Southwest team, an appeal team, and some other teams, is that we weren't prepared to compromise and lower the benchmark in its first year.
That's fair enough. Now, some people will say, no doubt, that you have, to a degree, accepted a team that does not meet all the criteria immediately in Perth's Glory as regards venues, etc., etc., and that a special allowance was made in their case to be actually included in the NPL. It was always a case that they were going to be included in it, but a special allowance was made. So the people will say, why not, in the fairness of, or in the interest of keeping Southwest region, which is basically what we're talking about here, in the competition, that you didn't make a special exception in their case as well, because it could have been if not necessarily Bunbury Forum Force, it could have been a Southwest conglomerate, shall we say, with negotiations, but to bring them in immediately.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions within that particular question. We'll deal with the Perth Glory. Perth Glory was going to be unique circumstances, and that was on record, and we all knew, etc., that they would essentially morph from an NTC to Perth Glory, etc. You made the comment that their facilities don't meet the criteria. Wherever Perth Glory plays next year as part of the NPL, their facility will meet the criteria. They will not play at a facility that will not. And I made this point on your show a couple of weeks ago, is that wherever they play and wherever they decide to play, and I'll come to that in a moment, is that their facility, where they play their games, will meet the criteria. So we haven't relaxed anything in that regard. Is that it is important, and I'm always reluctant to talk about the specific circumstances of a club, because I don't think it's respectful or desirable to talk about club details publicly and air that sort of dirty laundry, if that's the right term, publicly in their absence. But in regards to Bunbury, their facility or lack of, conscious that they currently play at an Aussie rules ground, was only one aspect. So let me just dismiss any concept that they weren't included in the NPL because of their facility as such. And when you make a comparison of, say, Perth Glory and Bunbury, and you know, why include Perth Glory when their facility and so on, that's incorrect. In terms of Bunbury being a conglomerate club, etc., they didn't really need to be. They're a club on their own rights. They've basically sewn up their southwest representation, etc. as such, unlike, say, and again I'm reluctant to bring other clubs into it, say Rockingham and Mandurah, who are basically competing for that Peel space, so to speak, is that Bunbury didn't have to do that. What didn't come through and what wasn't evident in their presentation, their application and their discussions with us was the total representation of Bunbury, of the southwest, etc. and so on, and the engagement of the community and so on. I really want to leave it there because, as I said, I don't want to dissect and go down to the nitty-gritty, but that's where there was a certain weakness. And, you know, for example, the Football Federation Southwest weren't engaged as much as they could have. They didn't support it. They didn't come up in terms of their presentation and so on. But it could have been so much more different and so on. But let me just also say is that we are committed to working with Bunbury 4 and Force over the next 12 to 18 months as they develop their new facility and as they, you know, go backwards in order to go forwards and get stronger, ready for the next intake of the NPL inclusions.
Now, as you said, so there was, what I'm trying to get at is, say the juniors that are playing in the Bunbury region at the moment, and basically they've got, in Bunbury, they've got under 12s in the Premier, their under 13s are top of Division 1, their under 14s are 6th in the Premier, their under 15s are in the Premier, and their under 16s are in the Premier. Now there's 5 teams that will no longer be able to play Premier League football next year because they won't be in the NPL. What about the kids that are there that actually want to play Premier League football?
Well, they'll still play Junior League, and Junior League in some regards...
Sorry, but Peter, that is not the Premier, that will not be the number 1 league now. These guys at the moment are playing in the top echelon of junior football at the moment. They will no longer be able to play in that. Is that not Football West taking their right away from playing in the Premier League?
No, look, I don't think so. Is that, again, as we said, is that there was always going to be some fallout and unsuccessful clubs, is that the Junior League Division 1 is still a very good competition and has very good... No, is it Premier League football? Yeah, Premier Division football? No, it's not. And
that's where most of the kids that are picked up from to other clubs are picked up from Premier League, because you're not going to get coaches going around the First Division or the State League First Division when there's a Premier League match playing at the same time. They're going to go to where the creme de la creme are.
It's an unfortunate, but again, is that this was not about having regional football. Regional football was not part of the criteria.
But, sorry, Pete, just on that, I was speaking to somebody, and I wasn't at any of the forums, but on one particular forum, one of the yearly forums where you had with the clubs, you had a whiteboard where you had all the regions and you said, we want teams in this region, this region, this region. We want clubs in the city to join. So what happens? A regional club gets dropped and a new club gets taken into the city where there's already 12 clubs.
I come back to my earlier comment. It was our desire, but not at the expense of reducing the standard. And so, as much as we would have loved a team up in Quinns, a team out in the Midland, a team down in Fremantle, Melville, Kenning, etc., a team down in Peel, and a team down in Southwest, and sometimes, you know, it's not the perfect result. And I first to say that. And the NPL was all about trying to get geographical coverage, but not in its first year of reducing the quality of cricket.
But that wasn't stated at the very beginning.
It was.
Well,
It was. And if you read the documentation, and if you read everything that we've said, this was all about excellence and so on. And so what I think I need to state, and conscious of Football West governments, governing bodies, etc. We're always the punching bag. Is that someone? It wasn't our fault or we can't be blamed for a presentation, an application and an argument that was not strong. Is that someone else needs to take responsibility in not being able to argue that case.
But from what I can gather, and again, I'm going on to the Bunbury one because that is the main one, the team that got lost from the Premier League.
No, that's not.
The team that has not succeeded from the Premier League.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Not lost, okay.
It needs to be, because people say, oh, Bunbury got dropped and Subiaco got in, etc., etc.
But that's not replaced, really.
That's
it is. That's what the general feeling is. I'm sorry, just on that also.
Right.
See, the results that were given by Football West, by Keith Wood to, say, Bunbury, showed clearly that two of the people on the committee, or on the interview panel, thought that Bunbury were up there. But it was only the third person who actually downvoted them all the way. They lost 11 points from that one person.
Well, again, is that it's a couple of things once more. It's disappointing that we try and provide feedback in what we would have hoped to have been a confidential document, and that for all intents and purposes the club has gone and...
No, I actually asked them.
Well, and they provided it to you.
Well, no, they didn't actually. They have not provided, and they didn't say which one.
The fact that you know that.
Yeah, well,
the fact that you know that is disappointing, and so.
But do you not think there should be open transparency in this whole... I thought that was the whole idea of this, that everybody was going to be aware as to how it was done.
Yeah, no, but people confuse transparency with total information. Transparency was all about the system and the process, etc. Not everyone knowing. There's certain elements of confidentiality and privacy and respect. And I could be quite open here now and tell all the mistakes that all clubs did and so on, and basically, but I'm trying to be respectful to them and not shame anyone, etc., etc. Transparency is not about knowing everything, every single piece of it. It's having a look at the process and the assessment mechanism, etc., and knowing that was right, equal, fair, and that it was a level playing field. Now, there was always going to be three, and if you've been told or if you've seen the matrix, etc., like, dare I say, the gymnastics, and you have a number of judges, and they always say the Russian judges, and so on, is a person had a different opinion, and it was all averaged out, so that there wouldn't be any personal bias, etc.
But really, yeah, I agree, Peter, but when you take that opinion and every single judgment on the Bunbury side, that particular individual, who nobody knows who it was, actually downscored Bunbury all the way. That to me, and it was the same person, that to me seems to suggest, and I'm only going what the general public, that person did not want Bunbury there.
No, not at all.
Or that felt that...
No. But again, if I can use this analogy of the Russian judge, in that particular circumstance, if they have a higher expectation, remembering that the judges or the members of the assessment panel were individuals who did not confer, etc., it's not a case of bias against Bunbury, because what you've got they've got certain expectations or standards. So that's what they felt, and that's what they took away from the Bunbury presentation and application. But they were probably just as hard, if that's the correct term, on other clubs.
Well, obviously not, because the actual there was 96 for wasn't it Coburn out of 100. So obviously they weren't as hard on them.
Well, Coburn obviously an application and so on. So,
but then again, Western Knights were told they had one of the top 3 best applications, but they still didn't get in.
Who told them that?
That's what they said they were told when they were doing the presentation.
Western Knights had a very, very good application. It was an excellent application. But there was a whole myriad of reasons. And again, I don't want to dissect every single application and every single club. But application and the quality of application and the thickness and the bulk and the quantity and whether it was all glossy and whether it had pretty pictures, etc., we dismissed, and so it was a very good application from Western Home.
Okay, can I ask another question about one other club, needless to say, and you know which club it's going to be, Subiaco, as being the club from outside of not only the Premier or First Division but the Second Division to get in. Did Football West in any hand, act, shape or fashion, or any member of Football West in any hand, act, shape or fashion, help Subiaco in any hand, act, shape or fashion with their application?
With their application, no. If you are, and I think...
or with finding their venue?
I think what you're trying to get to is, did anyone from Football West, me, assist in the Western Knights? The WA Athletic Centre. I introduced them to Venue West.
But does that not give you a conflict of interest with Subiaco when you were judging them on the actual panel?
Not at all. Because well, let me just explain this. Is that it's my job to help clubs across the board. It's my job, and let me just clarify and just make it quite clear. When asked, who do we speak to at Venues West regarding WA Athletics Centre, my answer was David Etherton, CEO of Venues West. I wasn't involved in the negotiations. I wasn't involved in them procuring it, etc. To answer a simple question and introduce, Now, let me just also go to say, it is my job to assist clubs, and I would have assisted 10 clubs at least in the 20 applications. I assisted Balcato in terms of the City of Stirling. I've assisted Armidale. I've assisted Fremantle. I've assisted Western Knights. I've assisted Sorrento. It is my job to meet and help with governments and mayors and councils to help clubs. And so if there's any inference that I was involved in the negotiation of the WA Athletic Centre, let me just refute that completely. Okay. All I did was introduce a club to the venue owner, Venues West.
Now, another one on that, is anybody on the Football West board attached to Subiaco?
Absolutely not.
Definitely not. Has nothing to do with Subiaco or Rosalie Park or anything like that?
Definitely not. Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, please, I mean, whether you turn the tape off and make make an accusation, but definitely not. And let me just also say, and this is where a lot of people are getting a lot of information in these chat rooms and blogs and forums, etc. Let me just say this. A person can go on there and make up any accusation under the anonymously under the name of someone else and just slander, defame, etc. There is no one. I did not was involved with the negotiation of WA Athletic Centre. There is no one on the board of Subiaco. I mean, it's just crap. Is that we very fair, very transparent, very fair and equal and so on. And Subiaco got in, and their application, presentation, engagement with the community, engagement with the councils, their corporate support, and various other aspects of what they were offering to bring to the NPL stood on their merit, and they were one of the best clubs in their whole presentation. They lost points because of their, the fact that, Division 2 and they're standing currently, and that's where they fell down. Otherwise, it would have been up there with the best.
Now, also from that, and again, I know you don't look at forums or anything like that, but there are definitely players from Subiaco who are actually at this stage, and I know sort of it gets back to Football West and that, who are actually saying that the two clubs, the juniors of Subiaco and the seniors of Subiaco, are basically at loggerheads with each other. Now, if that is the case, and again, this is an inference, so in actual fact, you wouldn't probably even know that, but you're now going on taking Subiaco's word at the actual meeting that you had with Football West as being true. What happens if you find out at a later stage that this is not the case? That there actually is there a case for a club, if they have been found to be lying to Football West when they did the interview, is there a case where they could be then disqualified from the league?
Yeah, look, there's a line in the warranty and the claims and the application that we accept everything that is said as stated fact, and we would be disappointed if that's not the case. But again, specifically coming to your argument, is that you've heard from a player that the two components...
Sorry, Pete, it's not only from players, there's been quite a number.
Quite a number of players. Yep. The two are loggerheads. So you prefer to believe that. No, that's where you're coming from. You prefer to take that on face value, and let's remember, it could be a disgruntled player, it might not even be a player, it could be just someone who's made this comment up. And as opposed to us, who had representatives of the juniors and representatives of the seniors, and we've seen the outcomes of strategic planning workshops, and we've seen the joint venture, and we've seen everything else, and we've had these two components of the clubs in the room, and if I can use this, very much in love and very much holding hands and saying everything is great, etc. And you want to believe a player on a forum, on a chat site, etc., etc.
No, I didn't say I believed them, I asked a question.
So let's also remember that everything's not hunky-dory.
And you've got to remember, Peter, that the questions I ask are on behalf of all other people around the place. I'm not doing it from my own point of view, and I hope you don't think that it is from my point of view. I am asking it because this is what's out there. If I wasn't asking the questions, I wouldn't be doing my job.
But people say, oh, this is what's out there. It's not
it is, though.
It's out there, again, by many people, again, who are anonymous, who have got an axe to grind, who... One person says something, and we know that. And what I prefer to do is take things on face value and on how we see it, etc. And let me assure you that both sections of the Subiaco Club gave a very much a united front as part of their NPL application, etc. And once more, I state is that I could name 5 or 6 clubs that I know of with inter-club and club dealings, etc. So, it's not uncommon, and we've seen in recent months, etc., many clubs that have undergone some internal restructuring and on the basis of concerns.
Okay, at any stage in this process, and I've only got a couple of more questions that are... I know, it's just getting a bit noisy here. By the way, just in case people are wondering, Peter is away on Monday, so I'm doing a pre-recorded, and I might add, he is unique in that this is the first ever pre-recorded interview on Let's Talk Football, so you can count yourself lucky.
You or me?
You. No, Peter. Did the selection committee or the selection of this ever consider the possibility of, and thereby solving the problem probably that has, or the angst, not the problem, the angst that has occurred, of actually expanding the NPL Premier League to a 14 team? Because I remember when I spoke to you on Let's Talk Football, it was tending to go down that way.
A couple of things. Firstly is that, we've got to remember, there was always going to be angst. Any unsuccessful club was always going to be disappointed, angry, annoyed, frustrated, and so on. So we knew that was going to happen. And again, it was just the way the cards landed, and unfortunately, in this particular case, and whether you're, Maddington, Canning, etc., they're all, well,
everybody thought they had a good chance.
And so on. There was at one stage an argument just to put L20 in and divide it into two conferences, etc. As you know, and you've stated, is that we were considering anything from 8 to 14. Already now is that we considered the 14, but on a number of accounts it was dismissed. Most importantly, the problem is the schedule. The competition schedule does not allow for a 14-team competition. Already we are bringing the season forward 2 weeks, and we're bringing forward the final 3 weeks. We have to allow a window for the NPL final series at the end, where the champion from WA will go up and play in the interstate competition. So that has required a 4-week window at the end, which will basically have our grand final being played in mid-September. We've had to move the season forward. And then the other thing that has complicated things in terms of the competition schedule is the FFA Cup, which was announced midweek, and next year that is going to have to be incorporated in. And because of the FFA Cup, which will kick off in June next year, we will need to bring our State Cup. So as much as we could have done a 14-team competition, is that would have I would have liked to have. We could not have from a competition schedule perspective. And then I say, even if we had gone with 14, Bunbury would not have been in the top 14. So I say that, and so 2 other clubs, but whether it was 14, the 15th club still misses out. It could have been 8 and the 9th club, and it could have been 18 and the 19th and 20th club would miss it. It was just the way it was. I'm disappointed that they didn't get it up there. I would have loved to have seen a team from Southwest and Peel, and we continue to still invest it. This week we announced government funding from DSR to do the Peel Festival of Football, which involves Glory and Melbourne Heart, and it still doesn't change our commitment to growing the game. But on this occasion, the assessment panel of Football West felt that Bunbury was just not quite at the stage ready for the inaugural season, remembering that the NPL was supposed to be a step up.
So now I come back to just basically to the I think I brought it up right at the very beginning, and that is with the kids that are down there, because really I'm more concerned about the kids in respect of losing them to football or losing them to AFL, because AFL is quite strong down there. Now, hang on, Pete. With the kids, if they want to keep playing the top grade, what do you suggest they do?
Do what Josh Risdon did, Callum Richardson did, etc. They did not play in Premier League they did not come through Bunbury Forum Force. We still have the options down there. We still invest money. We give money down there. Is that we're trying to get back into the Southwest Academy of Sport. We still, as part of our commitment and funding of Football Federation Southwest, we still run excellence schemes, youth development programs, and it's the Junior League Division 1. Remembering too that Bunbury Forum Force have only been in Premier Division for 2 years, so they haven't had a strong.
Yeah, but they've now got a taste of playing against the top.
Yeah, sure, and that's great, and I'm sure, I am confident and sure that in 12 months' time, this time next year, we will be announcing the likes of Bunbury and Mandurah and Rockingham and so on, and Swan, etc. in the new expanded NPL.
But will that not be, again, still not a Premier, because you won't be relegating anybody else to the Premier, so it'll still be only second tier of the second tier?
Well, again, that's assuming that we go in a tiered approach, is that we have a number of different options. We have a number of different options that are before us and on the table, etc. And so that could be a NPL 1, NPL 2, it could be NPL North of the River, NPL South of the River, it could be NPL A, NPL B in a conference scenario, etc. Clearly, when you expand and include more teams, is that you've got to come up with the options, and whether that's 2 8s, 2 10s, 2 12s, etc. We will now discuss that with both the current NPL successful clubs, if I can use that term, those who are unsuccessful, the State League Standing Committee and Football West, to try and come up with an appropriate answer. As I said, there's about 3 or 4 options there.
Yeah. Now, but also with this, is this not really playing into, I won't say playing into the hands of, but really strengthening the likes of your Coburn and that, who are probably the closest Premier club to them? They're now going to get possibly, I can't see, let's put it like this, it's a long trip from Bunbury or from the southwest up, and how many times are you talking? 3-4 times a week. First of all, if a really good kid comes along and should be playing in the Premier, and I thought that was the whole idea of this, that the best players do actually play up with the best standard, then their parents are going to be up for 3 trips a week to the city. Do you not think that is a massive impost on them? And will Football West consider, say, some financial help for some of these parents? Because I know myself, if it was me, I wouldn't be able to afford 200 Ks upwards and backwards, 3 times a week in petrol the way it is at the moment.
Well, I'm not sure what your point is. A moment ago you were saying so it's going to benefit Coburn.
Yeah, because players are going to probably come from there, from the southwest up to Coburn because of the closest side, which is still 100 Ks away.
So that's counter to your argument before about all these players missing out.
Yeah, what I'm saying is no. What I'm saying is, if Bunbury were still in, or if a team from down there was still in, they wouldn't have to travel. Now, if they want to come up, and if they don't want to miss out, and really we should be trying to encourage them not to miss out.
Sure. Okay, so kids in Albany, kids in Kalgoorlie, kids in Geraldton, are they any different to the southwest?
But they're not at the moment playing that top echelon of football, which Bunbury are.
Well, they will continue to play in the Junior League and Division 1, and those clubs...
But that's not the top echelon piece.
Well, it is still a high level, and if there are still some, and remembering too that the 2 best players that have come out of Bunbury, Josh Risdon and Callum Richardson, did not come through the Bunbury 4 and 4.
But that was because there was no Bunbury 4 and 4 Premier side at that time. If there was, they would have.
And they came through the NTC, and their mums and dads drove them up there, etc. And remembering,
petrol was not $1.50 a litre.
And we contributed $70,000. We've contributed $70,000 to Football Federation Southwest to put on and employ a development officer for local community elite training programs down there, together with SWAS and so on.
So, if a player is identified in these programs that you've got, would Football West consider helping with the expenses? Because it is a mighty expense. Well, people are not millionaires.
No, we assist all sorts of things. We have scholarships, we assist individuals, we assist and so on. We assist talented players, full stop, and hopefully some good players will come through as we do now. We currently have players from those regions in the NTC. They will come into the Glory and so on. And I think also, and to their credit, is that parents, being parents, and because they will do whatever, and
not a fear of financial pressure.
Sure, but also let me just say is that some of those parents are paying thousands and thousands of dollars to private academies and so on. So, and that's a different argument, but there is a great propensity for those parents to fork out thousands of dollars there. But once more, is that they've done it this year with. They've played Premier Division, etc. That's fantastic. But in a year's time, as I said, the NPL.
So is it likely to be 1 year as opposed to the original 2 that was put forward at the very beginning? In other words, are you willing to come forward a year to facilitate these clubs that have missed out, and basically what I'm trying to say is get a little bit of common ground in between, a little bit of compromise to sort of speeding up the process?
We would like to. I would like to, and Football West would like to, and the board has indicated that in the press release and all this commentary and the statement that we came out on Tuesday, and we've made sense. Conscious too that we live in a world of, clubs and well, it's not so much constant change, but the political and pragmatic reality is that you please one and you don't please the other. So certainly from our agenda and our objective is that, remembering too, and I said this on the radio on Saturday morning, is that 3 months ago there were talks that the clubs would boycott the NPL and not put an application in. There'd be a cartel and we wouldn't get any applications, and Football West would have egg on its face, and so when we got 25 applications, we were actually blown away. If we had have known that we were going to get 25 applications, if we had have known that the appetite, the flavour for change and the flavour of supporting the NPL was going to be so good, is that we probably would have done it differently, and we would have gone into it knowing knowing that there was going to be an NPL 1 and an NPL 2 or an NPL A and an NPL B, and we probably would have done it differently. So whereas we had going into it thinking there were going to be 13, 14, 15 applications and only making 12, conscious too that it's not just a case of saying I'm interested. They have to meet criteria, and it has to be a step up. It's higher than State League Premier Division now, the demands, etc. But to have 20 applications for next year blew us away, and another 5 for 2016. So over the next 8 months 8 to 12 months, 18 months, is that we'll go back and through the State League Standing Committee, through our NPL clubs when we get them together, is that we will start outlining our plans and for NPL Mark 2, and if I have my way, the board, it will be bigger, better and expanded and include other clubs.
Now, some clubs will say, and I'm going to wrap up very quickly because, well, the game has started, but no, I'm not really on that. Some clubs are sort of now are going to have, all clubs I should say in the NPL are now going to have the proper coaching set up all the way through. So the big question that has been asked around again is, what is the need for the NTC now at this stage? Because surely the same coaching standards are going to be applied throughout the entire, or isn't that the idea of the NPL, to actually standardise the coaching standards?
The standard of the coaches at the NTC and the Perth Glory is so much higher, and so they're A's and B's, etc., whereas this clubs are C's, and inevitably is that the NTC, the Perth Glory and the Skill Acquisition Program is the best of the best, and ultimately you are always in any group or association, you are always going to have the top 15, 20 players, and that's what the Skill Acquisition Program is, the NTC program and the Perth Glory, and these are the best of the best, and so it's taking a cross-sectional snapshot and picking out the best to train with the best under the best facilities, and that happens in every sport. You're always going to have a talented elite group that need additional training, additional circumstance, additional support, and so on to make them, and these are your professional career type footballers who hopefully will one day go on to wear the green and gold or the purple and white at Glory.
Now also with the Perth Glory side that's going to be in the Premier, what Perth Glory team is that going to be? It won't be the A-League team for all sorts of reasons, is that their insurance won't allow it, their contracts won't allow it, etc. But essentially it will be a combination of youth and other players that they've got around the place. We're still working out the criteria in terms of, do they have to be under 22 or under 20, or if they play a certain amount of games, etc. in the NYL, they're not allowed to, etc. But, where are they going to get the players from? Because they're not going to have, they're going to have the A squad, which is 22 players. Where are they going to get all these others? Where are they going to grab all these other players from?
Well, remembering part of the concept of the NPL was all about providing the best players in Perth and the A-League a 12 months training and playing environment, conscious of rest and recovery over a number of weeks, etc., is that you would see many of the NYL players and many of what is currently the NTC players, and this is a matter for Alistair and Kenny and Chris Ola and our technical people. I'm not going into name names, etc. That's their job. But many of the players who are currently playing NTC first team and a combination of the NYL will then morph into the Perth Glory in a virtually full-time training environment.
So basically the National Youth League and the NTC sort of together type of thing.
It is now in many ways.
Yeah.
It is now. And if anything...
And I complained bitterly that when it was just the NTC squad that it wasn't up to the standard for the Premier, so yes, I will go along with that.
Yeah, but it will probably be strengthened also by some other players that Glory will find and throw into them, etc. As to the actual, the rules and so on. That's still to be...
Next thing I was going to ask, salary cap for Glory's team. Will they have to fit in under the salary cap for the thing? Because the reason I'm saying that is that they are actually playing in competition with the other teams. They are playing for the trophies. They are playing for the positions. Now we're talking about 11 teams have to stick to a particular salary cap and point system for players. All of a sudden a 12th team is in there. Surely they're going to have to stick to the salary cap as well.
Yeah, we've got to understand just exactly what the salary cap implications are with the Perth Glory, but again, until we actually know who they are, it's a bit hard to. But remembering this is not about, Jacob Burns, Shane Smeltz and the like. And then, without being smart about it, is that currently Dan De Silva, for example, if I use that name, Dan De Silva gets paid a certain amount to play in the A-League. Let's say $50,000.
Yes.
Let's say $50,000. He is paid
more.
Well, there are minimum contracts, but just for the sake of mathematics, it might be $100,000. But he's paid that amount of money to pay for the A-League. How much are Perth Glory going to pay him extra to play for in a year-long round? Probably nothing. So the incremental cost to Perth Glory is for playing in the A-League.
Oh, you're drawing a long bow there, please.
No.
Well, that's much the same as saying that players at various clubs here can play for nothing. We know they're not playing for nothing. They not say they're playing for nothing, but they're not, because they're still getting a salary or they're doing something.
Yeah, but look, I think, and when I put that argument to the clubs, and they said, look, let's not even go down that path, is that we want, and many of the clubs said, we want Perth Glory in it. And let's make a rule, for example, and again, this came from the floor of the clubs, let's make a rule that the salary cap doesn't apply to Perth Glory. But they're under 20 players, so it's not about, as I said, Shane or whatever. And so if the clubs aren't concerned and they want Perth Glory and purple and white here down here at Bayswater, etc., and they say, we're happy because of the salary cap. Remember, let me just answer. The salary cap was a request of the clubs. It was a club-driven initiative and a club-driven project which we ran with because to constrain the wage constraints of players.
Okay, so if the clubs now turn around and say we don't want the salary cap for Perth Glory or for our teams, are Football West willing to take it away?
I don't think clubs will want that because the clubs...
But if they do?
Well, the clubs will say... Clubs have been saying to us that this is the best thing that we've ever done. No. They ask... clubs want to pay less.
Oh, I know.
Okay? So the clubs actually want it. So that I don't believe the clubs want to say that. Remembering too that 3 months ago the clubs were saying we don't have money, etc., and to do coaching courses and so on. Now clubs are employing technical directors. Now clubs are bringing up youth players, running youth development programs, etc. Clubs are saying that the salary cap is working, and that's your term. We call it the player payment system. Remembering too that these aren't wages, these aren't salaries. These are incremental costs or expenses to help them meet out-of-pocket expenses and so on. Clubs are saying that the salary cap is working and we want it to maintain, etc. And we want Perth Glory to come on board, etc. So I don't think that will happen. Clubs are still finding it tough. They're going to, let's take the first year of the NPL and see how it goes. And then in a couple of years, maybe it will expand, etc. Remembering too that there's going to be the player point system come on board, and so it will become much more level and easier to monitor, etc. And I think the whole wage bill, if I can use that term, will actually come down, conscious that clubs will be spending other monies on youth development and other components of the game like community engagement, marketing, promotional facilities, etc.
Okay. Look, I think we might leave it there, Peter. I want to thank you for very much for the time. It's not very easy for you, I know. I mean, getting around all the interviews, everything that has to be done. And again, thank you on behalf of Let's Talk Football for coming on. And we'll talk to you maybe, if you're available on Monday Night Live, just text us in the studio, and if we've got any more questions, we will ask you. Thank you again very much, Peter.
My pleasure.